Hey, it's Drybear. I've been playing the Dark and Darker demo like crazy. I've been looking forward to it since the last playtest. And today I want to share some of my thoughts with the class that I've been playing the most, which is Ranger, primarily in solo queue. I'll give you all the tips and tricks you need to succeed as a Ranger, what to look out for, fights that you can take, fights that you can't take, as well as gear, traits, and everything in between. As always, if you have any questions or comments for me, you'll find me live every day on twitch.tv/Drybear. Come by and say hi. So let's get into it. Ranger is one of my favorite classes. I think there's definitely, I've been playing all the classes, but I like Ranger a lot just because there's a lot of opportunity for mastery with the weapon in general, being able to aim correctly, get headshots, and being able to play around with various types of weapons. You can also run with spears or, really cool offhands that make things work really well. But it's also super satisfying when you get that really nice headshot or you use your ability. So let's start first by going onto the class tab. As of the demo, there is no talent tree. Once this is available, if there's interest, comment down below. I can start doing class guides for all the classes in Dark and Darker and go through all the trees in here that you can pick up as well. But over to perk and skill, you have you're basically you're available to wear leather and cloth. Now there's a trade-off between the two of them, and I've experimented extensively with both. Cloth will give you more movement speed, but less armor, and then leather will give you more armor, but less movement speed. And it depends on what playstyle you're going for. You can run a Ranger that tries to play primarily at range without anyone getting close to you. And in order to play that playstyle, you will want to run lighter armor in order to outrun anyone like a barbarian or a fighter or someone that wants to get in close and whack you. And you also probably will need some magic resistance as well, since there are some attacks that clerics have that are pretty hard to avoid. But here are the perks that we have available right now, listed up here on this, so I can put them all over here so we can look at them. The first one is crossbow mastery. This makes crossbows quite viable for Rangers, and I would even argue that unless you're only going to shoot once, crossbows really should only be brought by Rangers, but you can get some pretty serious damage on crossbows. Crossbow Mastery allows you to increase physical damage bonus by 5% when using a crossbow, and your reload speed and move speed when reloading is cut in half, which is huge. You can get crossbow reload time like stacked up, like out of control. It's really, really crazy. You can do some serious damage with crossbows. I've even one-shot some of the tankier classes using crossbows, so it's an option if you want to get it. Enhanced hearing is quite nice. I think the better you get at the game, the less you need enhanced hearing, but it is useful. So what it does is you can hear enemy footstep sounds from farther away. The more you play and the more comfortable you get, the better you are at picking out different sounds, walking sounds, awakening animations and sounds for specific enemies, knowing where like the mummies are, the skeletons, where there's goblins, where there's bats, and depending on whether you're on the castle or the goblin caves map, there can be a big difference. So I actually would encourage you to play with enhanced hearing initially, just so you can kind of get used to hearing people from far off. And as you get better, you can work towards not having it. Kinesthesia is quite good, especially if you're running with a faster bow, like the recurve bow or the survival bow. Both can work really well with kinesthesia. This just means that when you have the bowstring drawn, you move faster. Makes you much better at dealing with Ranger versus Ranger 1v1s as well, because then you can side strafe easier and it's harder for them to hit you. Nimble hands when using a bow, change your default shooting animations so it shoots 15% faster. And I would actually argue that this one is probably core to every single Ranger build. It's running no nimble hands is extremely painful. Unless you're running survival bow exclusively, which limits your range, nimble hands I would say is required for longbow and recurve bow. So I would encourage you just to have this. Ranged weapons expert is also super nice. It means that when you have a ranged weapon, and this works with crossbow, it increases your physical attack power by 5%. It's the difference of a couple damage points, but especially when you get headshots, it can make a big difference, and especially helps in killing some of the boss mobs that you'll run into. So I do recommend ranged weapons expert, but you can swap this out for others if you so choose. Sharpshooter makes your headshot damage increase by 15% when attacking with a long range weapon. And I would say that running nimble hands sharpshooter with a longbow is probably the best build that Rangers can run right now. I'll give you what my preferred build is for Ranger, especially in solo play. It changes slightly when you go into group play, but that's just something to be aware of. Spear proficiency is super fun. I think the spear is amazingly good. You can get spears from the weaponsmith sometimes if you pop in. We didn't get lucky. Well, we did get lucky this time. You can buy these pretty easily. And even at gray value, they do insanely high damage, which is very useful. You can also do headshots with them, and it helps you kind of pick off. You can shoot enemies a couple times. When they get close to you, you switch to the spear, and it's good at clearing out large swaths of melee enemies if you get surrounded. And you can also go toe-to-toe with some other classes. Just be wary that you don't really want to be doing melee all the time. Your stats and coefficients for defense don't stack up as well as cleric, fighter, or barbarian. And if you're brought into a melee fight purely, both at 100% against any of those classes, even if you have a good spear, you're liable to just lose it. So you want to be using your bow as much as you can, and then use the spear as a backup when they close the range, or depending on what your build is, if you're not going for a faster playstyle. But spears are an excellent option. It does look like they're also hinting at maybe war mauls coming in for rangers, so that could be pretty cool. So put this down in here, and then you can just go to the merchant and buy a spear, or I used to just store up spears in my stash just so I can pick them up and use them, which is super cool. You have tracking. This one I found probably needs some buffs. So what this does is based on a timer. It's got to be like recently. If someone has walked through, if you go near where their footsteps were, you'll see red footsteps on the ground, which shows where they were and the direction they were heading in. The reason I don't like this as much is typically by the time you get close to where their footsteps were, you're likely to be hearing them anyway, which I would argue enhanced hearing is better anyways. And the issue that I take with tracking is you have to be really close to where the footstep was in order to see it. Like you have to almost be within arm's length of where the footstep was. And so it's even running tracking, you can sometimes walk past footsteps without realizing it because the detection range is so short. So I usually don't run tracking, but it is an option if you want to play with it. And it can be useful in 3-mans on castle because you can track the direction that people were heading in. You can see where their footsteps were going. And that's probably the most valuable aspect of the perk if you do run it. Trap Expert is actually quite nice. This allows you to install traps faster. And I think especially in solos and in certain setup situations, the traps can be the only thing that's standing between you and getting cleaved down by a fully geared fighter or barbarian. It hurts a lot. And if they get to you, a lot of times you'll end up dying. The Trap Expert is something that I would run if you're just kind of getting used to the class. And honestly, if you are looking at a very basic build, this is what I would run starting out. Nimble hands for faster draw and shoot. More headshot damage is super nice. Then you run ranged weapons expert for even more attack power. And then trap expert so you can actually use traps in combat. You have other options here. You can run crossbow. You can run spear proficiency. Both are really good. And you can even run kinesthesia, especially if running for a faster bow setup, which we'll talk about when we get to gear. As it goes for skills, there's two main schools of thought here, and it depends on how geared you are and how good you are, how practiced you are at playing Ranger. The first is going to be what I would say is the general play style, which is running quick shot and field ration. Quick shot means that you actually reload your bow. Both quick shot and multi-shot will reload your bow and then draw on the new arrows. So you can use this when you run low on when you hit 0 arrows, you can use these abilities as a fast reload. You can even cancel them to keep the arrows that you reloaded. Both really great options. But I would say quick shot is much more useful because you can get 3 headshots in a row. You hold and release and it shoots 3 shots in a row. Whereas this one draws 5 arrows and fires them in a pretty wide spread. And typically you get the most value out of multi-shot by getting right up on someone, like right up in their face. And then you try to get maybe 3 arrows into their head. Note, I've tested this on the dummy. Every arrow after the first has reduced damage. So it's not like you can hit 5 arrows at full damage on their head. But it does do some nice shotgun damage if you want to use it. So when it comes to that, you can actually run like multi-shot and quick shot with no healing from field ration if you have good gear. So you actually are running like, some nice setups. You're getting something. You have, every slot's filled up and you have mostly purples. And then you can just buy a whole bunch of healing. It's probably best to run double damage abilities because then you can reload with quick shot and then reload with multi-shot and just keep the damage outflowing. However, when you're running, like if I'm just fresh and I lost everything and I'm kind of poor and I'm running a lighter build, I tend to run quick shot with field ration Field Ration has 3 charges right now, so you can use it to get 75 HP overall, which is huge. It makes a big difference. So those are your kind of options there. A special mention for Quickfire. I actually really like Quickfire. It almost functions similarly to Quickshot without the reload, but what it does is when you activate it, it's just a self buff for 8 seconds. It increases your action speed with bow weapons by 50%. So this includes reloading, it includes firing, it includes everything that involves your weapon. So you can actually use this similarly to Quickshot. You can pop, 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 and then while this buff is up, do a super fast reload, pop, 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 which can be really useful, especially, I mean, honestly, for any weapon. So I would put an honorable mention for Quickfire. You can even use it in place of Quickshot. It just has a little less burst, but probably more utility overall. True Shot, unfortunately, isn't that great. I don't think the damage output is enough. What you can do is you can run crossbow mastery, run a crossbow, scale high strength value, and get high physical power. And then you can just True Shot, which is a short duration ability. I think it's like 5 to 8 seconds. You activate it, your projectile flight speed is increased, and you get physical power. And so you just look for that one crazy crossbow headshot that does insane amounts of damage. So you run crossbow mastery with sharpshooter, with ranged expert, tons of like stats on you that do like weapon damage, strength, things like that. Crazy stacking on everything that you can, and then you just try to one-shot them with a crossbow. That's pretty much the only use that I would say for True Shot. Otherwise, every other ability is better utilized there. Next, let's talk about some useful stats, because when you're building your character and getting better gear and running into it, there are some things that you'll want to know. In general, my advice for Rangers is to run more physical power and strength. It makes a huge difference, and it depends on what weapon you choose to go with. Strength gives you HP and physical power, which means it gives you tankiness. You can take shots from a distance, and you can maybe survive a hit or two when they get close. And then when you run physical power as a flat bonus, it can be really nice to just give you some extra damage on physical power and bonus from that, which makes your hits harder and scales with your headshot damage, which is good. However, don't sleep on resourcefulness and agility. So this increases your character's move speed and your attack speed, which is draw and fire for your bow. Having high agility, especially if you're running a longbow, can make a big difference, allows you to really kind of pump out the damage. And then resourcefulness includes how quickly you install items such as traps and campfires, and you can actually use those traps. And once we get into game, I'll show you exactly how powerful traps can actually be, but it makes a really big difference. So that I would just say they're pretty easy to gear for. Just look for HP, armor rating, physical power, and strength. And then if you can, get a little bit of agility and resourcefulness, which can make a big difference for you. Next is your weapon choice. If you are not running Spear Mastery, you probably want just an arming sword. Arming sword is probably the best thing you can use. You'll end up having an offhand, but usually just an arming sword is all you need to whip out for melee range, attack, and do that. You don't really have many options when it comes to secondary weapons if you're not talenting into them. And the other option is that you could run crossbow, especially if you're running a crossbow setup. You can run the crossbow and then switch to it, fire, and then switch back to your bow and shoot as well to get some value out of that. But I would say arming sword's probably your best bet right now, and it does scale pretty nicely with other things. The one thing I will warn you on, especially, I see a lot of new players not realize this, but the buffs and stats you get from a weapon are applied when that weapon is in your hand. You can't treat your offhand as a stat stick, like just pick something that has value for your main hand. You get these buffs when you're holding it, which in that case, I would, you could run things like movement speed or extra HP or something like that, so that when you have to melee, you can, get some value out of that, but that's just what I would look at for that. So your 3 options for bow, aside from crossbow, are the longbow, the survival bow, and the recurve bow. And they are in order. Longbow is slow, highest damage, and it slows your movement speed, and it's slow to draw, but it has higher projectile speed and less gravity fall, less gravity drop off as it travels, which means it's easier to be accurate with and better at a long distance, as you'd think from a longbow. Recurve bow is kind of your in-between middle bow. It's a little bit slower, it's a little bit faster than the longbow, not as fast as the survival bow, but it does have some decent damage. It doesn't pack as much of a punch as the longbow, and just kind of like your middle ground. And then survival bow is the fastest. And this one is probably the hardest to use. When used correctly, if you're really accurate with it, it can be super strong, but the damage on it is relatively low. It does have a higher quiver max count on it, which is nice, and you move faster with it. So you can actually, like I said, you could run with, kinesthesia, get a bunch of agility, run with something like, your quick fire, then you get some decent physical power scaling, and then you can run with a survival bow, and then you're just dip, dive, ducking, shooting, hitting, dodging, and it's hard for people to catch you because you move so quick, and you're firing the whole time, but you will have to use a lot of shots to deal the damage that you need to deal, so, it depends on what you're playing for. I would say if you're in a group, longbow is probably the best, just because you have people in front of you to take shots and you're looking for that big damage bonus to kill someone. But in solos, you can run survival bow if you're feeling frisky. Next, more than most classes, I would argue that you need to be bringing extra healing. You're not a cleric that has good recovery. You do take a lot of damage from most sources. You want to be very careful about not bringing enough healing to keep yourself topped up. You're liable. I mean, I've been one shot by barbarians. I've been one shot by clerics. I've been one shot by fighters. I've been taken out in under a second by rogues. So not being at 100% HP for every engagement really does hurt you as a ranger. So I recommend bringing at least a full stack of potions and a full stack of bandages at the highest quality that you can, and then probably bring some backups for that as well, and have potions and protections available for you. So you can actually keep yourself topped up. It's super important. You are very squishy. Now, when it comes to in-game, you have to play very carefully with Ranger. Again, they're quite squishy, and your biggest threats are going to be a barbarian or a fighter getting in close, or getting surprise attacked by a rogue. They hurt real bad, and if someone gets the jump on you, it can be the end of your day. So you really want to kind of step your way through, use torches to kind of lead the way, make sure you're very careful about your positioning, make sure you're always reloaded on your arrows, and keep yourself in a good spot, and try to look for headshots whenever possible. A tip that I'll give for new ranger players is if you see the reticle in the middle of the screen when I'm drawing, right when it's done drawing, you see how it comes together? Use that as your availability for the shots. You know that right when those come in, you can release the shot and deal damage with it. Super useful. The other thing I'll tell you, which I didn't figure it out for a little while, is that you can actually press F, your pickup or use button, to cancel your shot. So if you don't want to release the arrow, someone's in front of you and you're worried about firing it, or you don't want to use the arrow, press F, and you can even do it right when it starts. You can cancel that animation immediately. It's super useful, super clutch. So make sure you're utilizing that the best that you can. You can also use arrows to break objective or block things like this. It's usually faster to do it with your melee weapon, and it's usually why I have a melee weapon around, is you can kind of use it to break these. It's a little bit faster, but just keep in mind that if you have to, you can break these obstacles with your arrow, especially if you're running quick shot, which you activate and it fires 3 shots in a row. It can be really useful to just quickly boom, break it, destroy it, get it out of your way. So keep yourself topped up, keep that reload, and then actually what we can show as well is the fact that when you are empty, your quick shot will reload your quiver. Your arrows are infinite. You don't run out. You can just keep reloading forever and ever, and you don't have to bring them with you as of the current build in the game. You notice how I have 0 arrows right now in my quiver in the bottom right. I can't fire again. If I activate quick shot, it reloads and then draws those arrows. The same thing goes for the shotgun ability. However, you can release those arrows or you can cancel. So you can actually use quick shot to instantly reload, cancel, and then go keep moving, or you can use it for the quick shot. Both are great options. Your other ability, Field Ration, which you're going to be using a lot when you're newer to Ranger, has 3 charges to it. It is your best heal in combat, but it's also something that it's replenished every time, so you can really get some good value. Now, I'll tell you, when you're facing off against people, the best thing you can do is aim for headshots, especially with the longbow. Now, I took all my gear off, so this isn't going to hurt too bad, but you'll want to kind of do something there. When you see blue effects on a fighter like that, you know that they're sprinting. Then you want to be really careful about them getting in close, and you want to use doors as much as you can as well. So in this situation, you hear someone on the other side, or you know someone's coming, the best thing you can do is put a trap on the door. They can hear traps. Every good player knows to avoid them. But now you have kind of like a little bastion that you can kind of defend yourself on, which is really useful. So you know that they're coming. Use doors as much as you can. The only people who can break doors are the stronger enemies, like the Draugrs, the skeleton champions, or barbarian. So if you're against a different class and they're coming in, they're trying to hit you, stand in the doorway like this. When they swing, activate the door, and then you want to go and shut the door so they hit the door instead of you. Use distance, be tricky, run away, use that as much as you can to be the best ranger that you can. You can disable traps by pressing F on them to get them to turn off, and this works for other rangers' traps as well. You can also jump over traps to get them out of the way, and you can also walk around them if you're really careful so that you run into them, but it is possible for you to step in your own traps. Now, these traps will just keep ticking damage on you, and they won't break. You can't do anything about it. So I see a lot of people who get in traps, they don't know what to do. You can shoot the trap to break it, I believe, but the fastest way is just to crouch and disarm it. The reason you crouch is because you kind of give a harder hitbox for them to shoot at if they're aiming for your head, and then you move on that way. Top yourself up with some field rations and look for some headshots. That's basically Ranger. Watch out for traps, set up traps. If you think someone's coming your way, try to get into the circle. So right now I'm not in the circle. You want to go find your way into the circle as fast as you can and then set up for it, right? So like find a good spot where you can actually be safe. That guy just died to a beetle. That is super unlucky. But you just want to go find a spot that's super safe, get in the circle, and then set up. Your traps can't be recollected after. Once they're down, they're consumable, they're gone forever, which is kind of cringe, but it is the way that it is. I'm not going to take a shot here, unfortunately. Ow. So you want to use those to the best that you can. Don't poison me, Mr. Beetle. So if I get to this spot here, I know I'm underneath this spot in Goblin Caverns or Goblin Caves. Then I can trap this behind me if I think someone's coming behind me. Always set up traps proactively and then look for an easy out or kind of use that distance as long as you can to try and get kills. And then loot and then get out. And that's Ranger, man. Like that's basically it. That covers most of it. Let's see what this cleric's got. I have no gear on and he's in melee. It's over. But that's Ranger. If you have any questions or comments for me, you'll find me live every day on twitch.tv/Drybear. Come by and say hi. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.